The following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
This morning, we are honored to welcome New York City Deputy Mayor for Government Affairs and Communications, Howard Wolfson. You can give him a round of applause. Howard is a native New Yorker, first working for our good friend, Congresswoman Nita Lowey, as her Chief of Staff and Press Secretary. He served as Executive Director for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee from 1998 to 2000, and then acted as Communication Director for the U.S. Senate campaign of Chuck Schumer in 1998 and Hillary Clinton in 2000. Howard led the New York offices of Glover Park Group, and in his spare time, he was a frequent Fox News, very interesting contributor, and I think we have all enjoyed Howard's thoughts and comments. Last year, Howard served as the campaign strategist for Mayor Bloomberg's re-election and later joined the administration in his current role as Deputy Mayor. We welcome you to ABNY, and we will look forward to continuing our working relationship with the Bloomberg administration. We are pleased to you have chosen ABNY to present the remarks about the current state of New York City and the administration's future plans. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Deputy Mayor Howard Wolfson.
As Bill said, I joined the Bloomberg administration at the beginning of this term after helping the mayor on his re-election. It is indeed a privilege, as many of you who are out there who've worked in government know, it's a privilege to serve in government in New York City. And it's especially a privilege for me because I get to work for a truly great mayor in, as we know, the greatest city in the world. And I get to do it, some of my colleagues are here, thank you for coming. I get to do it alongside a group of very dedicated people who are determined to ensure that there is no let-up in the third term and that we continue to build on and expand the achievements of the first two. When the mayor asked me to come in and serve in the third term, he made it very clear to me that his expectation for us was to do even more than had been done in the first two terms. It's a very tall order. We've achieved an extraordinary amount, and some extraordinarily talented people have been in the Bloomberg administration and left, but that's the task before us. And the current economic climate, while daunting, has not blunted any of our ambition. In fact, it's given us a reason to take on some of the very long-standing challenges that confront New Yorkers. So far, if I may say so, I think we're off to a very strong start. Because of the mayor's prudent planning, we've continued to avoid the kind of destructive cuts that New Yorkers who lived through the early 70s fiscal crisis remember all too well. And I want to give a special shout out to Speaker Chris Quinn and the City Council who've been partners in this effort. I don't think they get enough credit for the work that they do in partnering with this administration to take the tough steps to make sure that the city runs well. At the same time, we've continued to make smart investments to diversify our economy. So we've cut in some places, but we've also invested in others, and you need to do both. And as a result, New York City has been able to weather the storm much better than the rest of the country, and we are now leading the way in the nation's recovery, which I think is an achievement to many of the people in this room, achievement to the city. I mean, if you think about the recession, in many respects, having as an epicenter the difficulties in Wall Street, it's truly fantastic to think that we are now actually leading the way back. To prove that point, let me give you one very impressive statistic. New York City is responsible now for 1 out of every 10 private sector jobs created in the country this year. So in the last year, 1 in 10 private sector jobs created in New York City. Less than 3% of the nation's population is creating 10% of the nation's private sector jobs. And the city's unemployment rate has declined 7 out of the last 8 months. So a very strong record of recovery here. Unemployment around the nation and New York City is still too high, but we are absolutely heading in the right direction. This has only been possible because we have not stopped making investments where it counts. I want to talk about some of those investments, some of the areas of success. Take tourism, which supports 300,000 jobs and will generate nearly $30 billion for our city this year in revenue. Hotel occupancy during the first half of this year was up 6.8% compared to the same period in 2009. The number of non-commuters taking Amtrak to Penn Station was up almost 10%, and arrivals at our airports are also up. I get every week an email from George Fertitta at NYC and Co. with all of these metrics. I mean, we are the data-driven administration. We are constantly besieged with numbers about how things are going, and all of the tourism numbers every week are fabulous. And they're fabulous for a good reason, because even if you visited New York just 2 years ago, we're giving you plenty of reasons to come back. We have the new Brooklyn Bridge Park. We have expanded programming on Governor's Island, which set a huge record this summer in terms of people going there. We have a new amusement park at Coney Island, something very near and dear to me. We have another Yankees run to the World Series, which also brings in a fair amount of tourism dollars. At the risk of offending half the audience, I would share a joke that I like to tell this time of year, which is, what is the difference between a Yankees hot dog and a Mets hot dog? You cannot buy a Mets hot dog in October. I knew that that would get half of the crowd and the other half of the crowd, but that's okay. We continue to revitalize Lower Manhattan. The World Trade Center site is now at a point where you can see construction progressing every single day. And it's interesting to see the narrative around this. As somebody who spends a lot of my time doing communications, for the longest time, the narrative around the World Trade Center site was delay and gridlock and inaction, how terrible it was. And in the last 6 months, if you do the LexisNexis search, if you have the Google alerts, you can see all around the country now people are beginning to get the word and tell the story about the success of the construction there and how fantastic it is. So by making the city safer, by enhancing its attractions, we are now, for the first time in a long time, the #1 tourist destination in the United States, more than Disney World and more than Las Vegas, and that is a remarkable achievement. And as a result, there are now more jobs in our city's hospitality industry than there were before the recession began. So in many respects, tourism and hospitality is helping us lead the way out of this recession. Delta, American, and JetBlue have each expressed confidence in the industry's future by recently committing to expanding service and modernizing facilities at JFK. But it's not just tourism that's outpacing the rest of the country. Gary LaBarbera is here. Our construction industry is also experiencing some signs of a rebound, thanks in part to the biggest capital plan in the city's history. And as I said before, we're determined not to repeat the mistakes made during the early 70s and the fiscal crisis there. That's why we've committed to spending more than $12 billion on capital projects in fiscal year 2011, more than double what was committed in fiscal year 2004. Many of those investments are going towards new school facilities and transportation infrastructure, like the rehab of the Brooklyn Bridge and the extension of the number 7 subway line. You know, the success in our schools is truly miraculous, and if you look at the metric of how many people are now trying to send their kids to public schools, you can see the success. And so we have the happy chore of building lots of new schools because there are lots of new kids that want to go to them, and there are lots of their parents who want to send them there. We're continuing to work on all fronts to accelerate job creation under the direction of Deputy Mayor Bob Steele. We're helping small businesses access financing and incentives, and we're also gearing up our support for startups. Most of all, I believe, this mayor has created a sense of confidence in our city and our future, and it's confidence that underpins hiring and economic decisions. Every dollar invested, every dollar that everyone in this room invests in their business here in New York, every job that you create, every person that you hire is fundamentally an act of faith in our city, and it is our job in city government to help keep that faith. Now, I've talked about the good things, but the challenges are clear, and they are significant. While our tax revenues are expected to continue to grow, that growth will be modest. Economically sensitive taxes in fiscal year 2011 are still $3.5 billion below their peak in fiscal year 2008. And our projections are that city's tax receipts will remain below pre-recession levels through fiscal year 2012. And the increase in these revenues will be more than offset by the expiration of hundreds of millions of dollars, more than $1 billion, frankly, in stimulus funding. Not to mention the mounting pension and health benefit costs the city faces. I want to talk for a moment about those because they cannot be understated. The pension system guarantees our retirees a set rate of return, and the city is legally obligated to make up the difference if the pension funds fall short of this rate, which they've done routinely over the past decade. The guaranteed rate of return is 8%. And as the mayor likes to say, the only place you get 8% is with Bernie Madoff. As a result, the city's pension expenses have grown from $1.4 billion in 2002 to an estimated $7.5 billion this year, which represents 11% of the city's budget. And by 2016, we expect those pension expenses for the city to be as much as $9 billion a year. That doesn't include health care costs, just pensions. This is a runaway train, and we desperately need Albany to partner with us to help step on the brakes. And that will be one of our signature priorities at the state level this year. Over the past 3 years, we've cut roughly $4 billion from our budget, and we are currently seeking to cut another $2 billion, in part to help cover our mandated pension costs. We've just gone through another round of cuts, and these cuts are significant, and they are difficult to achieve, and we are doing them, but the pension costs create an enormous problem. Deputy Mayor Stephen Goldsmith is also leading an effort to consolidate back office functions, which will save $500 million over the next 4 years and another $500 million every year after that. But the majority of what we've cut so far has come in personnel and city service costs, because those are the things that we have control over. And if this situation is left unchecked, the quality of city services will undoubtedly deteriorate, because every year a higher percentage of the operating budget will have to go towards paying pension costs. Think about that for a moment. The only way that we will be able to continue paying the folks who have retired is to lay off the people who are working here now, or to cut services for people living here now. Immigrants fuel this city, but I do not believe that we will continue to attract people here if they believe that their tax dollars are going disproportionately to pay for the pensions of people who retired before they arrived. And I believe it is increasingly unfair to ask middle-class New Yorkers in the private sector to pay disproportionately for public sector pensions that they increasingly don't have access to. We've seen how General Motors became a pension fund that also made cars. Unless we make real changes, New York City's government is in danger of becoming a pension fund that occasionally delivers city services to the people who live here. And we cannot allow that to happen. To compound the difficulty in arresting this problem, pensions are prohibited by state law from being discussed during collective bargaining, even though they're obviously one form of compensation like salaries. Just think about that. We bargain collectively with the municipal unions, but pension levels are set in Albany. We have no control over them. So we can't fix this problem by negotiating directly with the unions. We have to go through Albany. Now, theoretically, we can kick this can down the road and hope that someone else deals with it. This could be a problem that the next mayor inherits. But this mayor is determined to tackle this problem and leave this city in better shape fiscally than he found it. And dealing with our mounting pension costs is the biggest part of that puzzle. So we are taking this fight on, and I would urge everyone here to join in that effort. Everyone here is an influential person in your own field. You love this city. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. And I hope that you all, in talking to your legislators and talking to your assembly people and your state senators and the next governor, you let them know just how important it is for the long-term stability of this city to deal with this issue now. I think we have a moment after the next election. The winds of change are blowing. And the next governor will have an opportunity to deal with some of these problems in a way that past governors have not. Because crisis creates its own opportunity in some regard. And we want to be there right at the beginning, at the negotiating table, to deal with this issue. And as I said, I hope everyone is there with us. Another major legislative priority of ours this year involves education. There is nothing dearer to the mayor's heart than this issue. He understands that if our children are going to grow up and lead the 21st century economy, then we need to fix our school system. Our goal is to ensure that every child who graduates high school is ready to start college or a career. And it starts with giving students and parents more options. That's why we advocated for legislation passed by Albany this summer, and I give our leaders in Albany credit for this, that raises the cap on the number of charter schools allowed in the state. At the beginning of last year, when I started this job, I was told that there was no way that Albany would lift the cap on charter schools. It was not politically possible. But working with a lot of people in this room, working with a lot of educators, a lot of people in the private sector, we formed coalitions, we made the case, and we were able to lift the cap on charter schools. That is the kind of model that I would like to see going forward in many of our other areas. We are also committed to supporting and rewarding great teaching, because the single biggest factor in a kid's education is the quality of the teacher in the front of the classroom. I am the child of teachers. My mom was a teacher in the New York City school system. My dad is a teacher. My stepmother taught in the city school system for 25 years. So I know how fabulous and dedicated the vast majority of our teachers are, because I saw it every day in my own home. And I know that it is true that the most important thing in the life of any student is the quality of the teacher, which is why it was so important that we reached an agreement with the teachers union earlier this year, and I give Michael Mulgrew a lot of credit for this, that fixed the disciplinary process for teachers and closed down the notorious rubber rooms that were a vestige of the dysfunction in the school system. But there is more work to do, and there are more reforms yet to come. Last week, we announced a third-term agenda for education. Teachers who help our children advance academically deserve every reward we can give them, and we will do everything we can to reward them. But those who don't do not deserve a lifetime job. Beginning this year, our policy will be very simple. Only teachers who help students and schools move ahead significantly for at least 2 consecutive years will earn tenure. Automatic tenure is a thing of the past. It is also time for us to end the last-in, first-out layoff policy that puts children at risk here in New York and around the country. Law in Albany mandates that if we are to lay off teachers, we cannot look at any metric of quality in doing so. And the only data that's important to determine who stays and who unfortunately gets laid off is the amount of time they have served in the school system. So with more budget cuts looming, principals would have no choice but to make layoffs based only on seniority. Newest teachers first to go, even if they're the best teachers. That's not the right way to run the schools. In education, the measure for every decision should be simple. Is it good for children? Is it good for children that if we have to lay off teachers, the only metric we can use in doing so is their time of tenure? The answer is no. That may be good for politicians, might be good for unions, but it is not good for children. There is no business in America, there is no business person in this room that would want to be prevented from taking competency, basic competency, into account when making personnel decisions. But that's exactly what would happen in our school system if we have to lay off teachers. So we are going to continue lobbying Albany for the power to objectively and transparently evaluate teachers and then make personnel decisions based on what that tells us about what matters most, success in the classroom. And once again, you all can play a big role here. This is a great organization. It played a major factor in bringing this city back from the brink during the 70s. And today, as I said, there are big challenges on the horizon. But as I also said, where some see obstacles, this mayor sees an opportunity born of necessity to take on some of the entrenched problems that have stymied New York for so long. So we are really going to need your principal support and involvement through it all, and together we can keep New York moving forward. I want to thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm happy to take your questions.
Howard, first of all, you have our pledge and our commitment to work with you on all these issues. These are all been part of our platform for a long, long time, and we look forward to helping you and the mayor and the rest of the administration to solve these very, very important issues. And questions, I'm going to ask the first question, if you don't mind, Chairman's prerogative. Howard, your view on the election, both statewide and national, and what do you see happening in November?
Well, let me give you a couple of caveats on my bias. My wife is the Chief of Staff of the Speaker of the House, so I'm not allowed to say that the Democrats are in big trouble, or I hear about it at home. So I hope that none of you will mention to her, Suri, don't mention to her that I said the Democrats are in big trouble. But I'm not telling you anything there you don't know. I think here in New York, as I said, this is, you can feel the wave coming. And this is going to be maybe a once in a generation or once in 20 years change, major change election. Every candidate, whether they're an incumbent or a challenger, is running under the mantle of reform, because people in the state get it. They get that the taxes are too high. They get that they're not getting quality back in services. They get that Albany is dysfunctional, and they're sick of it. So I do believe that we will have major change in Albany. I do believe that that change gives us tremendous opportunity to enact some of the reforms that we talked about here and others. The mayor is supporting, just to give that plug, the mayor is supporting Andrew Cuomo because he believes that he'll be able to hit the ground running on day one and work with us here in New York City on some of these issues that I've talked about. He's supporting Harry Wolfson for Comptroller. I don't know how many of you have met Harry. I did not know him until, didn't hear of him until being introduced to him. I think he's extraordinary. I think it is amazing that someone of his talent and his experience would run for Comptroller in this state. I think we are very lucky to have somebody like him. I was particularly attracted to his story because this guy is a Republican. I mean, he's a real Republican, unlike other people we may know. And he sent an unsolicited email to the White House and said, I want to come and work in the auto task force because I have experience in restructuring and turnarounds. And he got hired. I think he's the only Republican who worked in the auto task force. And so this guy, a real Republican, goes to Washington, leaves the private sector, spends 20 hours a day figuring out how to save GM, how to save the jobs, how to save the company, how to do what was right. And I think it's an amazing testament that You have somebody in a very partisan atmosphere who's willing to put aside his own partisanship and go to work, president of another party, for the good of the country. And I was in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and I was at a party, and I met somebody who I knew who also worked in the auto task force, and I said, tell me about Harry Wolfson. And he said that if I were not, this guy is a rock-ribbed Democrat. He said, if I were not legally prohibited from doing so, I would have left already to work on his campaign. I mean, this is somebody who is just going to be a fabulous public servant, in my opinion. Mayor supporting Dan Donovan. Dan Donovan has an outstanding record as a prosecutor in Staten Island. Mayor knows him well. He's a person of unquestioned integrity. Mayor believes that for Attorney General, you should have somebody with a law enforcement background who's been in courts, who's prosecuted cases, who could make wise and judicious decisions about law enforcement. And I'm hopeful that all of the mayor's picks will be elected. I don't know that, but I'm hopeful. Because I do think that in this year, we are not going to have straight down the line ticket voting anywhere in this state. I think people are looking at the individual candidate. They're looking at the quality of the candidate. I think Mayor Koch has done an awful lot to direct attention to some of the dysfunction in Albany, and also done a lot to tell people that, you know, if you're a lifelong Democrat, it's okay to vote for Republican if the Democrat is not doing the job, or vice versa. So I am, in a way, I look at the dysfunction in Albany, and it makes me optimistic, because I think we are going to see major changes as a result, and as a result of those major changes, the city and the state are going to get better.
Howard, in terms of the pension reform, what's the strategy to accomplish this dramatic change to help us? How are we together going to accomplish that?
Well, I think, you know, the way we were able to achieve some of the successes we had in Albany in the last year was that we tried to work in concert with people. We reached out. We had a lot of quiet conversations that were never reported with lots of different interested parties, to see where common ground could be found. And I do not rule out people who may have traditionally taken different views of this issue seeing this in a different light, given circumstances. I think it is possible that unions, you know, very progressive or liberal Democratic legislators may say, you know, that you look at the data, this path is not sustainable. We need to do something. We need to do the right thing for the future of the city and the state. So our first objective will be to try to work with people to get this done. And I'm optimistic about that. I also think that we have, as I said, I think we will have a new governor. I think we will have lots of new faces in Albany who get this and who can help kind of prod that debate along. But we may also be coming to some people in this room and asking for some assistance various times along the way, and we hope that you'll be there with us.
We will definitely be there. So, Howard, thank you very much for your insightful comments, and we look forward to working with you.